All right, boys and girls, this is Math Message 1-5, and in this lesson we're going to work on telling and writing time to the nearest minute and using a number line to find elapsed time. All right, first thing we're going to do is I want you to choose the clock that shows the time. Be prepared to share how you match the time with the correct clock. So if we were in class, of course, we would be discussing this a little bit, but I just want you to look at these two times and tell me which clock shows 1:30. Pause the video to give yourself time to look at them. Okay, now in a previous lesson, I reminded you that, we looked at a clock the other day and we remembered that there was a longhand and a shorthand. And so we talked about how to remember that. When you were born, you started out little, right? And then you got big. So look at the little hand first. That little hand is going to tell you the hour. Now, we also talked about when we were little, we just counted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. And so when you're looking at that little hand, you're just looking at the number that it's on. Sometimes, like in this clock, it might be between numbers. So we talked about how we're going to choose the littler number. So we would choose the number 1 for that time. So this clock would be showing 1. And then we looked at the clock and we looked at why, because it's 1 o'clock for an entire hour as that minute hand moves around the clock. And then when we're big and we look at the big hand, now we can count by fives, 5, 10, 15, 20, and so on. So when we look at the big hand, that is our minute hand, and we're counting the minutes by fives. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. So this clock here shows 1:30. Now remember, boys and girls, we talked about those benchmark times that you really need to bury in your brain so that when the minute hand is on these times, you need to immediately know them and not have to count by fives. So we talked about these benchmark times on the clock. When the minute hand is up here, that is when it's the o'clock. When the minute hand is on the 3, that's when we have the 15. When the minute hand is on the 6, that's when we have the 30. And when the minute hand is on the 9, that's when we have the 45. So if you don't know those immediately, as soon as you see those numbers, then you need to be practicing those. All right, let's look at the second clock. Look at the little hand first. On this clock, the little hand is pointing down toward the 6. It's not completely on the 6, but it's between the 6 and the 7, so we're going to choose the littler number. This time is 6, and now let's look at the big hand or the minute hand, and we can count by fives. So that would just be 5 minutes. Now, when we write 5 minutes, we have to write 05. We always have to have 2 digits in that minute spot. And so if it's just a 1-digit number like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or through 9, we have to write the 0 first. A lot of times we see boys and girls write the time like this, and that would be incorrect. We got to write it 6:05. All right, so look and see which clock shows 2:45. Pause the video and give yourself a second to look at it. All right, when we look at the little hand first, on this clock, the little hand is between the 1 and the 2. So that is actually the 1 o'clock hour. So this one would not work. Look at the little hand first on clock D. The little hand is pointing between the 2 and the 3. It's almost on the 3. So a lot of times we want to say, oh, it's 3 something. But remember, when the hour hand is between 2 numbers, we're going to choose the littler number because this minute hand is getting really close to being up here at the next 3 o'clock hour, but it's not there yet. So this is still 2, and then the minute hand is pointing to one of those benchmark numbers. Remember, we said o'clock, 15, 30, and 45, so hopefully we don't have to count by fives around the clock. All right, looking at clock 3, which clock shows 4:55? Pause the video. All right, looking at the little hand first, I've got my little hand pointing here. It is almost on the 5, but it's not there yet. That minute hand is getting really close to this next 5 o'clock hour, but it's not there. So this is still 4. And then my minutes, I'm going to start here at 45, 45, 50, 55. So this is the clock that shows 4:55. All right, turn in your workbook now to page 8. Give yourself time to do that. Pause the video. All right, so you are going to write the time shown on each clock. And I want you to go ahead and do this page on your own. Pause the video, and then you can restart the video to check your work. Okay, hopefully you took time to pause that video if you didn't do it. So now we'll go ahead and go over this. If you made any mistakes, now is the time to go ahead and correct it. Remember, you can always pause the video if you need to do any erasing and checking. So write the time shown on the clock. Look at the little hand first. That little hand is pointing to the 2. And then the minute hand, that's on one of our benchmark times. If you don't remember it, you can count by 5s, 5, 10, 15. Clock 2, look at the little hand first. The little hand is pointing to the 2. It's almost on the 3, but it's not there yet, so we have to choose the 2. Look at the big minute hand, count by 5s. I'm going to start down here at 30 because I should already know that. So 30, 35, and 40. Clock number 3. Look at the little hand first. That little hand is between the 3 and the 4, so I'm going to choose the 3. And now the minute hand is down on that benchmark time, so I should know that right away. That time is 3:30. Looking at clock 4, look at the little hand first. My hour is between the 3 and the 4, so I'm going to choose the 3. Now this time on this clock, did you notice that that minute hand is between numbers? That minute hand, and now remember, this is the minute hand. This is our big hand. We're big kids now. We can figure this out. So I know that if it were on the 7, that would be 35, because here's 30 and 35. But each of these little dots in between, we talked about these when we looked at the clock a couple of days ago. These are each minutes in between. I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So each of those little tick marks are minutes. So if it's 35, 36, and 37. So you should have had 3:37. If you didn't have that time, be careful, because in 3rd grade we have to tell time to the nearest minute. All right, number 5, look at the little hand first. That little hand is pointing directly on the 10, and I know that because the hour hand, I don't know if I said minute hand or hour hand, that hour hand is pointing directly at the 10, and I know that because my minute hand is pointing right up at the o'clock time. Now looking at clock 6, look at the little hand first. My hour hand is between the 10 and 11. But I'm going to call that 10. And then my minute hand, again, is between numbers. So I have to count exactly where it's at. Right here on the 2 would be 10 minutes. So now I count my dots in between. 11, 12, and 13. So my time is 10:13. Now, if you had trouble with this page and you were struggling, you need to get one of these analog clocks at home. You could go to the dollar store and you could get a really cheap clock that you can practice the time at home. All right, so now we're going to look at elapsed time. Elapsed time means the time in between things happening. And we're going to use an open number line for that. Now, the other day we used an open number line for rounding. Now we're going to use an open number line for finding elapsed time. And we always have the beginning time. I'm going to abbreviate. We have the ending time. And then we're going to count that time in between, or that elapsed time. So that's how we're going to use the open number line. Let's look at this problem. It says Michael's class started math centers at 2:15 and ended them at 2:40. How could we figure out the exact amount of time that passed while his class did math centers? So I want you to pause the video and I want you to see if you can figure out how much time passed from 2:15 to 2:40. Pause the video. All right. Now, I'm going to use an open number line. This is going to be a way that we can really show our thinking. Even if we did it in our heads and the teacher said, explain to me how you figured that out, you could draw your thinking on an open number line. So I'm going to put my beginning time. It says his center started at 2:15, and it says that they ended at 2:40. So I'll put my ending time down here. And now I'm going to count that time in between, but I'm going to do it in jumps that make sense to me, okay? Now, this is where different people might solve it different ways. It just depends on how your brain kind of thinks that through. For me, because I know those benchmark times, I recognize that this 15 is a benchmark time. So I'm thinking if I jump from 15 to 30, that's 15 minutes. So I'm going to make a 15-minute jump, and I'm going to land at 2:30. I always put my jumps up top of the number line, and I always write the times I land down below. Now I have to get to 2:40. So I'm at 2:30. To get to 2:40, I recognize that. They're both 10s. 30, 40. So now I'm going to go ahead and jump 10 more minutes, and that will get me to my 2:40 time. So first I jumped 15 minutes, then I jumped 10 minutes. When I add that all together, I jumped a total of 25 minutes. Now, maybe your brain thought about it in a different way. So I'm just going to do, whoops. There we go. So I'm just going to do it one more way. There's lots of ways. If you were in class, we would probably show lots of different boys and girls. But some of you might have jumped 5 minutes first because that gets you to an easy 2:20. Okay, so then you're getting to an easy 10. Now you might recognize, well, from 20 to 40, that's 20 minutes. Or maybe you needed to jump by 10s and say, well, in 10 minutes it'll be 2:30, and in another 10 minutes it'll be 2:40. Or some people may have jumped that whole 20 minutes altogether. But when I add up my jumps, it still equals 25 minutes. All right, so that is just kind of a little quick introduction to elapsed time. We're going to be working on elapsed time a lot more through the next couple of days and really throughout the year. And so I encourage you, go ahead and come up with some things to figure out with elapsed time. Maybe figure out, what time do we get to school and what time do we leave school, and then figure out how much time is in between. Maybe you want to figure out, okay, what time do I get home from school? What time do I go to bed? And then how much time do I get to spend at home? So come up with a couple of things that you can figure out the elapsed time. Maybe what time did a movie start? What time did a movie end? And how long was that movie? And give that a little bit of practice. All right, guys, that is it for lesson 1-5.